The hospital hallway was quieter than it had ever been, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes every breath feel heavier than the last. On that final shift, as the sun dipped behind the skyline of St. Louis, Sarah Whitman walked out of Mercy Ridge Medical Center carrying a cardboard box with her name scribbled on the side. Inside it were 10 years of a life she thought she would retire from. Creased scrubs, a cracked coffee mug with a faded cross, handwritten notes from patients who had once called her an angel. She had just lost her job as a nurse, and she had no idea that before the night was over, the same sky that watched her leave in shame would roar open with helicopters begging for her return. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing good even when no one is watching, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us why humanity still matters. Sarah had been fired at the end of her shift for a decision she knew might cost her everything. Earlier that evening, the emergency room had overflowed after a multi-car pileup on Interstate 70. Beds ran out, supplies ran low. Protocols tightened like a noose. When a young uninsured man named Caleb Morris came in bleeding internally, administration had already warned the staff about non-covered cases. Sarah saw the monitor numbers dropping, saw the fear in his eyes, and made a choice. She pulled supplies from a locked trauma cart without authorization and began life-saving interventions while waiting for a surgeon who was delayed in another wing. The man lived. The rules were broken. By morning, Human Resources had made their decision. Her supervisor, Janet Holloway, wouldn't meet her eyes. Policy mattered more than outcomes. Sarah's badge was taken. Her career, it seemed, was over. Driving home through quiet Missouri streets, Sarah felt hollow. Nursing had never been just a job to her. Raised in a small church outside Springfield, she believed service was a calling, not a contract. She had missed birthdays, weddings, even her father's funeral because patients needed her. And now, on her last shift, the hospital she gave her life to had decided she was a liability. When she reached her modest apartment, she placed the box on the kitchen table and sat in the dark, wondering how faith could hurt this much. But Mercy Ridge Medical Center was not done with her story. Less than 2 hours after Sarah left, a call came in that would throw the hospital into chaos. A private charter plane carrying a youth baseball team had clipped a fuel truck while attempting an emergency landing at a nearby airfield. The explosion injured dozens, many with severe burns and traumatic wounds. Local ambulances were overwhelmed. The National Guard was alerted. 2 medical helicopters were dispatched, one after another, their rotors slicing through the night sky toward Mercy Ridge, the only level I trauma center within range. Inside the ER, panic spread fast. The charge nurse, Michael Brennan, realized within minutes that they were understaffed for what was coming. Surgeons were called in. Extra beds were rolled out. But there was a problem no one wanted to say out loud. The one nurse on staff who had extensive burn unit experience, combat triage training, and the uncanny ability to stay calm in mass casualty events had just been fired. Sarah Whitman. As the first helicopter landed on the rooftop pad, carrying children and coaches wrapped in ash-stained blankets, Michael made a call he technically wasn't authorized to make. He called administration. Then he called again, and again. Because every minute without Sarah felt like another life slipping through their fingers. The hospital CEO, Richard Coleman, watched the live feed from the helipad and finally understood the weight of the mistake they had made. Policies suddenly felt small compared to the blood-soaked stretchers rolling through the doors. At Sarah's apartment, her phone buzzed on the table. She almost ignored it. When she finally looked, she saw the hospital number flashing on the screen. Her first instinct was anger, then exhaustion. But something deeper stirred in her chest, the same pull she felt every time a code blue echoed down a hallway. She answered. The voice on the other end was frantic, stripped of authority and full of fear. Mercy Ridge needed her back, immediately. 2 helicopters were inbound. They were asking, no, begging, for her return. Sarah didn't hesitate long. She pulled her scrubs from the box, hands shaking as she changed. She didn't ask for her job back. She didn't demand an apology. She simply grabbed her keys and drove, tears blurring the road as she whispered a prayer for strength. When she arrived, security waved her through without question. The ER doors burst open again and again as victims poured in. Burned skin, broken bones, children crying silently from shock. And in the middle of it all, Sarah moved like she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. She organized triage zones, assigned tasks with quiet authority, and stabilized patients others thought were lost. She improvised when supplies ran out, taught younger nurses techniques she had learned years ago during disaster response training in Louisiana after a hurricane. Doctors deferred to her instincts. The chaos bent around her calm. Hours passed. By dawn, every patient from the crash was alive. Exhausted staff leaned against walls, some openly crying. The helicopters sat idle on the roof, their mission complete. In the aftermath, the truth spread quickly. Parents of the injured children asked about the nurse who never left their kids' sides. Social media posts appeared praising a woman named Sarah Whitman, the nurse who had saved lives after being fired hours earlier. Reporters began calling. By midday, the hospital board convened an emergency meeting. Richard Coleman stood in front of them and admitted the hospital had failed to understand the cost of rigid policy over human compassion. Sarah was called into an office she thought she would never see again. She expected paperwork, maybe a formal reprimand. Instead, she was offered her job back, with full reinstatement, public acknowledgement, and a new role helping redesign emergency response protocols. She listened quietly, then asked only one question. Would the uninsured man she saved earlier be allowed to complete his recovery without fear of being turned away? When the answer was yes, she nodded. That was enough. Before the day ended, Sarah returned home, not as a fired nurse, but as a reminder that integrity often carries a price before it earns respect. She placed the cardboard box back in her closet, unopened, a symbol of the night she nearly gave up and the faith that carried her through. Outside, the same sky that had thundered with helicopters the night before was now calm and blue, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside Mercy Ridge Medical Center, and in the lives of dozens of families, everything had changed. If this story reached something deep inside you, if it reminded you of the power of compassion, courage, and standing firm when it costs the most, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like Sarah's alive. And just before you go, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what part of this story touched your heart the most. Because sometimes, the world changes not with noise or applause, but with one quiet nurse who refuses to walk away.